Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Out of the Ordinary. I'm your host, Mikey. So let's get started here. Hey, Calvin, what's going on, man? How you doing today? Happy Memorial Day. James Carnes, what's up? So yeah, today we're gonna be talking a few topics. Let's get started with that. Hey, Tom, the Ghost Blimp. In 1942, the final outcome of World War II was still very much in doubt. The United States had every reason to fear that the Japanese would launch an all out attack on the West Coast. Let's see here. Hi, Natalie. Hello, everybody that's here, everybody watching. Um, Military historian and author, Carol Gleans set the scene. There were known to be Japanese submarines operating off the coast. There had been attacks on an oil refinery down near Santa Monica, near Los Angeles. There was a great fear that there would be more attacks. The Navy responded to the threat by putting together a fleet of 12 blimps to patrol the California coastline. The mission of the Airship Squadron 32 was largely uneventful. That is, until August of 1942, when one of the blimps crashed on a street in Delray City, California. The two-man crew was not on board. That day, the legend of the Ghost Blimp was born. Historian Ken Gillespie lived in Delray City at the time. And let's go to the comments here. We have Natalie saying, Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Yes, Happy Memorial Day. Taryn Kerper, hello, welcome. Whoa, who was that man behind the curtain? Hi, Jillian. Hi, Farmer. So let's talk right here. It was almost important for the crew members not to have been seen by somebody, but nobody saw them go. Nobody saw them jump. And there are no relics of them at all. It's a real puzzle. The legend of the Ghost Blimp began in San Francisco on August 16th, 1942. It was early on Sunday morning when Flight 101 prepared to take off. The pilots were 27-year-old Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody and 34-year-old Ensign Charles Ellis Adams. Both were experienced and reliable, which made the events of the next 5 hours even more mysterious. Aviation machinist, mate Riley Hill was supposed to go with Adams and Cody that morning. Adams had flow in large dirigible and was thoroughly checked out. But he never flown in small blimps before. This was an introduction flight for him that Sunday morning. Just before departure, Riley Hill was ordered off the blimp for some unknown reason. Hill now believes that heavy moisture in the air was weighing the blimp down, making it unsafe for takeoff with 3 men on board. And he quotes, "So I got out, shut the door, and locked it, and they took off." The flight plan called for the blimp to leave Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay, pass over the Golden Gate Bridge, and then head to the remote Farallon Islands, 25 miles off the coast. From there, Flight 101 would continue north to Point Reyes, then south along the coastline. The first leg patrol went smoothly, but an hour and a half later, after takeoff, Lieutenant Cody radioed squadron headquarters and said, "Position 4 miles east of Farallon's standby. 4 minutes later, Cody called again and reported an oil slick on the water. According to Riley Hill, those were the last words ever received from Flight 101. When it came time for further explanation, and we didn't get it, we just assumed, well, it was negative, and they went on their way. 3 hours passed with no word from the crew. Flight commanders became alarmed. Frantic attempts to contact the blimp went unanswered. Finally, a message was received, but it wasn't from Flight 101. It was a report that the blimp had somehow drifted 8 miles off course and had come ashore just south of San Francisco. Ken Giuseppe recalls the event, and he quotes, "There was a swimmer, a man named Mr. Capuleva, who was standing ready to go in the water when all of a sudden he saw this huge gray mass just coming out of the fog right at him. Remember, this thing is 47 feet wide and wasn't too high off the water. And he watched it come in. It dragged its wheels along the sand and the water's edge, then hit a little sand knoll. It bounced up in the air and then moved up a little bit of a canyon and then hit rather heavily on the side of the canyon. This knocked off what turned out to be a depth charge." So let's go to the comments here real quick. Natalie says, "The Pacific Ocean is full of high strangeness." I've never really been much to the Pacific Ocean or anything like that, but I have heard a lot of strange things about that. According to my aunt, lived in California for a long time. She lived in San Jose. So the collapsing blimp was seen by hundreds of people. Bunny Giuseppe was 16 years old at the time. "I was on the way home from Sunday school when I saw this big gray thing coming in through the sky. I was very surprised, as were a lot of other people, because things like that don't happen in Delay City." Flight 101 quickly lost altitude and headed straight for the homes in the hills of Delay City. According to Ken Giuseppe, one woman's house almost became the point of impact. It was Mrs. Appleton. She said that all of a sudden, this huge behemoth had settled and scraped across the top of her roof. She said it sounded like chains dragging, but the entire house was blackened out because of the size of this thing. She raced to the front of the window, wondering what in the world was going on, when she saw the rest of it. The gondola hit the cross arm, broke off part of the mechanism there. Then it gradually settled down to the ground. Miraculously, no one was injured when the blimp landed in the middle of the street. Almost immediately, Delay City officials were on the scene. When Navy personnel arrived, they were shocked to discover that there were no signs of Lieutenant Cody or Ensign Adams. The door latch was open, which was highly unusual in flight position. The safety bar, normally used to block the doorway, was no longer in place, and a microphone hooked to an outside loudspeaker dangled from the gondola. Riley Hill, active aviation machinist mate with the U.S. Navy, had prepped the blimp for flight. The ignition switch was still on. The radio was still on and working. Nobody had touched my fuel valves. They were set up just the way I had left them. We still had another 6 hours of fuel. Lieutenant Cody Cap rested on the instrument panel, and 2 of the 3 life jackets on board were missing. Suggested the crew had put them on before takeoff, as regulations required. A locked briefcase containing top secret codes was still in its place. It was as if Cody and Adams had opened the door and simply just stepped out into the air, said Ken Giuseppe. The machine gun was still there. Expandable life rafts was there, as well as one more life jacket. There was nothing missing. The Navy investigation revealed that Flight 101 was seen by several ships and planes between 7 and 11 a.m. Some of the eyewitnesses said they were close enough to see Cody and Adams in the gondola, and everything seemed normal. Theories emerged almost immediately about what happened to the two men. Some believe that Cody and Adams spotted an enemy submarine. When they descended to investigate, they were taken prisoner. According to other rumors, the pilots were involved in a lover's triangle with an unknown woman. Supposedly, one murdered the other during the flight, then fled the blimp when the blimp crashed. Naval investigators came up with their own theory. They believed that one of the officers climbed out of the gondola to fix a mechanical problem and had some kind of trouble. The second pilot came to his aid, and the both men fell overboard. A year later, Lieutenant Ernest Cody and Ensign Charles Adams were officially declared dead. The blimp itself was repaired. After the war, it became the Goodyear blimp. Seen by millions at supporting events across the country, few were aware that the airship circling overhead was in the infamous ghost blimp. And Natalie says, them crazy lovers triangles." Right? The Black Hope curse. Just outside of Houston, Texas, is a neighborhood filled with upscaled homes and manicured lawns. In the early 1980s, Sam and Judith Haney settled in at the far western edge of the development. Oh shit, it's the Goodyear blimp, damn. Sam described it as their dream home. He quotes, "When we bought the house in Newport, it was the house that we had always been looking for. So it was the house that we intended to stay for a long period of time. But there was a morbid secret about the Haney's perfect home, one that soon turned their lives into a never-ending nightmare. Sam said it all began when a mysterious old man showed up at their door with an ominous warning. And the old man said, this elderly man told him that he had noticed that they were putting a swimming pool in their backyard, and that there was something about their backyard that they needed to know about. So he followed him around into his backyard and pointed at the ground and said that there are some graves right there. And he marked the spot on the ground where they were. And he really didn't know how to react to it. So he didn't know if he was joking or not. And he says, I couldn't understand why anyone would want to joke about something like that. Using a backhoe, Sam decided to see if the man's alarming claims were true. Sam says it wasn't long before he hit something. And at that point, he says, we stopped with the backhoe and we got down into the hole and continued digging by hand. There were pine boards. When they were lifted up, the first board, we could see an indentation of a skeleton form. It didn't take long to figure out that it was actually human remains. Sam immediately called the sheriffs and county coroner, who conducted an official exhumation. Sorry, I can't pronounce that. Most of the bones had turned to powder, but 25 fragments were found. Some so brittle they disintegrated when touched. A second coffin located alongside the first had been disturbed. Inside, 2 wedding rings were discovered on frail index fingers of the exposed skeletons. Judith Haney was mortified by the discovery. She says, they handed me the rings, and it was sickening to think that they had desecrated somebody's grave. They moved the headstones, but not the bodies. Yeah, there's a couple of cases where people have done that. So she says, wanting desperately to do the right thing, the Haneys decided to find out whose remains were buried in their backyard. The search led them to longtime resident named Jasper Norton. Years earlier, Norton had dug several graves in the area. He told the Haneys that their home and dozens of others were built on top of an old African American cemetery called Black Hope. They decided were mainly former the deceased were mainly former slaves. The last burial was in 1939, and as many as 60 people were interred there in paupers' graves. The two people buried in the Haney's backyard were Betty and Charlie Thomas. They died during the 1930s, and their graves were eventually forgotten. Judith and Sam Haney made an extraordinary decision. They reburied Betty and Charlie in their yard. Excuse me. But according to Judith, peace was not forthcoming. No. There was a clock in the bedroom, and one night it started sparking and putting out a sort of a blue glow. When Judith checked the clock, she found it was unplugged. That was only the beginning of the Haney's ordeal. On another evening, Sam went to work the night shift, leaving Judith alone. I heard a sliding glass door open and heard what I thought was Sam saying, "What are you doing?" Everything was quiet. The sliding glass doors were locked, and I thought, well, you must be losing your mind. This really must be getting to you. But much to my amazement, that's not where the story ended. In the morning, I awoke, went to my closet to get my red shoes, and I could not find them anywhere. Sam backed up Judith's story. So, of course, I started looking for them and went through all of her closets where she normally put things. And we just couldn't find them. We had walked just a short distance from where the grave sites were, and I could see something on the grave. And they were both side by side, like someone had just picked them up and carried them over and laid them down on the grave site. Even more disturbing to Sam was the realization that this was Betty Thomas's birthday. And I kind of got the feeling that it was like Charlie was giving Betty a birthday present. Oh, that's nice. Judith felt she knew what was going on. Judith says, I began to come to the realization that this was not all in my mind. And this had to have some relationship to Betty and Charlie's graves being disturbed. Their spirits were saying this isn't right. The Haneys were not alone. A dozen of their neighbors also reported lights, television, and water faucets turning on and off, and unearthly sounds and supernatural apparitions. Worse, these bizarre events were becoming malicious. Like the Haneys, Ben and Jean Williams thought that they had found their suburban paradise when they moved into the same neighborhood. But Jean said that she never felt at peace in the house. Jean says, after we moved, everything changed. When I tried to plant new plants, they just would not live no matter what I did. Fertilizer or whatever. They still would not live. And constantly a foreboding feeling, a feeling of things that are not right, or something bad is about to happen. The Williams said that near their flower bed, sinkholes appeared the unmistakable shape of a coffin. The Williams would fill them in, only to have them reappear a few days later. The Williams also felt their ideal home was being invaded by menacing presence. Random shadows slid along the walls, followed by whispered words, and putrid smells. Man, I would hate to smell something dead. It's crazy. At the time, William's granddaughter Carly lived with the couple during the blazing heat of the summer. Carly said she would stumble into bone-chilling pockets of ice-cold air. She says it would be very, very chilly, and you'd have this feeling of foreboding, or just like something wasn't right. Anywhere in the house, you'd have the feeling that you were not alone. Somebody was watching you. It terrified me to be in the house by myself. The toilets used to flush on their own. As the water went down, I could hear it was almost like conversations. You could hear people murmuring to themselves. It was a presence or spirit or something there, something that wanted to be heard, wanted me to know that it was there. Gene Williams had no doubt that to the sources of the disturbances. Oh, hi, little bit. Gene says, I absolutely believe that all of these things happened to us because we were on the graveyard and that we were simply going to be tormented until we left there. Ben said, and he and Gene debated to what to do next. Ben says, me and Gene, we talked it over, and she said, well, what can we do? Walk off and leave it? She said, we ain't got enough money to pay down on another home. And he said, we've always been fighters. We're gonna stay right here and we're gonna fight it and try to beat it. Try to fight it and beat it. You can't beat a poltergeist. Ugh. According to Ben, it wasn't long before he got his chance. He says, I came home from work around 10 after 12 from the midnight shift, and I walked straight to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator door, and that's when I seen two ghostly figures. And they went straight backwards into the den, and then they started heading right down the hall to Jean's. And it was standing right about a foot and a half from the end of the bed. The only thing I really thought was, they ain't messing with me, with my wife. As I dove through it, I felt a sticky cold sensation in my body. Down the street at the Haney's, Judith said the disturbances caused her life to unravel. She says, I was crying all the time. I was frightened. I was scared of doing my daily routine in my own home. The Haneys decided to fight back in court. They sued the builder for not disclosing that their home was built over a cemetery, in part so that everyone would know that what was happening at their subdivision. A jury awarded them 142,000 for mental anguish. But the reversal ruled on the legal grounds that the developers were not liable. The verdict was thrown out, and the Haneys were ordered to pay 50,000 in court costs. Sam Haney recounted the total cost of their ordeal. He says, at that point, we decided to file bankruptcy. All in all, we ended up losing the case, losing the money, and losing the house. The Williams also explored legal recourse, but they say they were told that without definitive proof of a cemetery on their property, nothing could be done. It was then Jean made the decision that she will forever regret. That was the last straw. You want a body? I'll show you a body. So I thought to myself, I can dig about 2 feet a day, and I knew I would reach a body. But soon after she started digging, Jean felt ill. Her adult daughter, Tina, volunteered to finish the job. After digging for a half hour, Tina also felt ill. Carly Carluck was there that day. She says, I remember her saying that she felt funny. She was getting dizzy as well. She put the shovel down and she went back inside. And she just laid down on the couch. She's like, Mom, Daddy, I don't feel good. I don't feel right. There's something wrong. The last thing I remember her saying was, Mommy, take care of my baby. Take care of my baby. And she cooked, and she looked so scared. While waiting for paramedics to arrive, Jean tried to keep her daughter conscious. Almost immediately her eyes started glazing over. And I was talking to her, trying to talk her out of dying. Please, Tina, talk to me, she said. And all this time, her eyes were changing until they got into a point where I knew she wasn't responding at all. Tina had suffered a massive heart attack. 2 days later, she died. Jean burdened the blame, and she says, I realized that I had desecrated another grave, and now I'm paying. She told Ben, we have to get out of here. It doesn't matter what we lose, what we had. And I knew if we didn't, that I was not going to make it because my fight was gone. I could fight no more. The Williams escaped to Montana and later moved back to another house and another neighborhood in Texas. Today, they're a happily growing family, no longer plagued with mysterious noises, horrific apparitions, or heartbreaking tragedies. Back in their old neighborhood, none of the current residents have reported any paranormal activities. No one has ever been able to explain what happened to the Williams or the Haneys. Yes, that is sad. I mean, it, it's sad on all levels because I mean these poor people, they moved in and they're they didn't know that there was a graveyard, and when all this it's just BS. But now here's the grand finale. Y'all ready? DB Cooper. Yeah, I know, Natalie. I know you've been wanting to hear about DB Cooper, and so has Cemetery Joe. So here we go. On Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a man who identified himself as DB Cooper walks into the airport in Portland, Oregon. According to FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach, there was nothing unusual about him. He says, he says he was your typical businessman, a suit, tie, raincoat, carrying an attaché case. Nothing distinctive about him except perhaps the fact that everything was very dark. Black tie, black raincoat, black shoes. He appeared at the ticket counter, bought his ticket, and just gave the name Cooper. Cooper wanted assurance that the plane was a 727. Agent Helmsbach explained why. The 727 became notorious through this case because it is the only airliner from which a successful parachute jump can be made from the passenger's cabin. DB Cooper bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. His only luggage was a briefcase. He was the last person to board the plane. He took his seat while the 727 begins taxiing through the runway. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner was the first crew member to talk to Cooper. And she says, he handed me a note and kept looking at me. And I just ignored him the first time. He looked at me and then he said, I want you to read the note. It was printed, Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase, and I want you to sit beside me. And Natalie says, DB Cooper, crazy or crazy like a fox? So Cooper opened his briefcase so Florence could see what was inside. Florence said, I saw a big battery with 6 dynamite sticks wrapped around the battery. And he said to me, all I have to do is attach this wire to the gadget here and we'll all be dead. And so began one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in U.S. history. To this day, no one knows the true identity of the man who called himself D.B. Cooper, or if he survived his daring parachute leap of 10,000 feet. The case remains the only unsolved skyjacking in the world. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner went to the cockpit to inform the crew about Cooper and his threat. She recalled, "We were very, very scared to death. All of us were. I was thinking about dying. That's all I thought. I was also thinking I'll never see my parents, my brothers, or my sisters." The flight crew immediately notified air traffic control about the hijacking. They, in turn, contacted the FBI. According to Agent Helmsbach, Cooper's demands were precise. He wanted 200,000 in cash in a knapsack and 4 parachutes. He identified the parachutes as 2 front pack parachutes and 2 backpacks, and he specified that the airline remain in the air until the money and the parachutes were ready at Seattle. He also specified that the other passengers would not be told that the airplane was being hijacked. The flight crew proceeded as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Hey, out of the ordinary. What do you know? Natalie says, in rain, sleet, and dark from commercial airplane. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Meanwhile, the FBI communicated with the airline. Agent Helmsbach said the airline agreed to pay the ransom. So Calvin says here, he didn't bail out over the forest. He threw a bag with a little money, then bailed out closer to the desert. Yes, that is true. The FBI asked the airline what their approach to the hijacking was going to be. That is, did they wish to pay the ransom? This is an option that the victim of extortion has rather than law enforcement. And they responded instantly that they wished to pay the ransom. And so the FBI at Seattle set about assisting in obtaining the money. Each bill was photographed and the serial numbers recorded. Cooper also insisted the plane be refueled immediately once it landed in Seattle. No passengers were to be released until all of his demands were met. He also instructed once it landed, the plane should stay on the runway rather than to taxi up to the terminal. At 5:43 p.m., Flight 305 landed in the Seattle airport. The plane taxied in and was parked in a remote area of the field. Then, according to Agent Helmsbach, the bag of ransom money was brought aboard. They were carried on board by a flight attendant. There were 10,000 $20 bills assembled in straps of 100 bills to a strap. An individual strap held together with rubber bands. The money alone, just the currency, weighed 21 pounds. 4 parachutes were also delivered. Both the flight crew and the FBI were worried that Cooper would use the extra parachutes to take hostages along with him. The passengers on board were completely unaware of the drama surrounding them, which included FBI snipers, according to Agent Helmsbach. During the time the airliner was on the ground at Seattle, there were FBI agents with scoped rifles who were prepared if the indications were present. That required it to pick him off. Finally, the passengers were allowed to deplane, but Cooper demanded that the flight crew and one attendant stay on board. Florence Schaffner recalled her conversation with the co-pilot. The co-pilot said, "You better get the hell out now." So she left without Tina, and that's when he decided to keep her because he was getting suspicious at everything. The passengers were met by FBI agents. It was only then that they realized that the plane had been hijacked and that their lives had been in mortal danger. When debriefed, they could remember nothing about the man with the briefcase. Cooper ordered the pilot to fly from Seattle all the way into Mexico City at a height of 10,000 feet and at the speed of only 200 miles an hour. He agreed to refuel in Reno, Nevada. According to Agent Helmsbach, Cooper then made an unusual request. He wanted the rear stairwell to be lowered prior to takeoff. The pilot explained that he wasn't able to take off with that door open, and they argued back and forth. And finally, the pilot said couldn't fly the airplane and wasn't going to try. And the hijacker consented for the door to be closed for takeoff, which it was. At 7:37, Flight 305 took off. The Seattle control tower alerted all other aircrafts to remain clear. Cooper 727 had the sky to itself. He told her to go back. Oh shit. Phone is over here. Oh, okay. All right. I'm gonna have to cut this a little short because we are having some technical difficulties here. Basically, DB Cooper just afterwards he was wanting to go to Mexico, and basically he jumped out of the plane and disappeared. And many say that they have found his money and everything like that, but they never found Cooper's. So that's my show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. This show was made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. And thank you, Odd Mother, Cemetery Joe, Liz and Frank. All of you are awesome. Don't forget to follow, like, and share Psycho Buddy Death Cult, Psycho Man Tim 13, PBDC TV. There's a lot of great content artists within the collective. This has been Out of the Ordinary. I'm Mikey saying good night.